I want to make a 50s style corset next, commonly known as a Merry Widow, and I will talk about those and their history in my next video when I'm actually going to sew it. But tonight I want to show you how I construct my pattern. I hope this inspires you to take a quiet evening and make something pretty for yourself. It's not too complicated, it's a bit of geometry really. This is also a general basis on how I usually construct the patterns for my corsets, for dresses. You might have seen the one I made for my Vivienne Westwood dress interpretation. There are some patterns for Merry Widows out there on Etsy, I believe, but I think there is a lot of benefit in making one myself since it is a foundational garment, I'd be able to make it fit my body perfectly. And I do have an original from the 60s, I believe, that I bought on eBay for 20 euros 10 years ago. It doesn't fit me perfectly, especially the underwires, but I'm going to use it as a reference when constructing, and I'll show it to you in as much detail as I can. I also don't really like these pointy cups that are so common for a 50s style, because on these corsets the boning usually goes up to the center of the cup. These cups are also constructed in a slightly different manner, but for my corset I want to use the exact same cups, the exact same underwires that I used on my bra, which will make it similar to the type of corsets that are used today inside of evening dresses and special occasion dresses. So I'm going to use the bra pattern that I showed you how to construct in my previous video as a base for this pattern. If you've already constructed your bra and you're going to use the same underwires, you can choose to simply transfer the needed points and lines onto transparent paper and work from there. Or you can start completely from scratch like I did, but to simplify things, I named the points the same as in the previous video. You're going to need the baseline, point 1, 0 and 3, the line of the underwire and its ends, point 4 and 5, the markings for where the cup is going to go, and point 6, so the center of the gore. First I'm going to find the end of my corset where the closure will be. For that I subtract the width of my closure from the underbust, which I measured very snugly while breathing out right underneath the tissue, parallel to the ground, and it's going to be half of that. This will be my new point 2. Unlike the formula for the bra, we don't need to subtract the 10% for a corset, simply because it doesn't need to pull as much here, since the hold and the pull on the underwire will be evenly distributed among all of these pieces, which will eventually sit quite tight on the upper body. In most cases it's sufficient to just use this very snug, very tight measurement of the underbust. Now, as with the bra, I'm going 3 centimeters down in a right angle to the baseline. This will be my point 7, which I'm going to connect with point 3. Now I'll measure the distance between 3, 2 and transfer it to the line 3, 7. This will be my point 8. On this new baseline we will now find the positions for each piece of the corset. As you can see, the original has 5 pieces. These 2 are made out of stretchy materials, while these 3 are not stretchy at all. And this is a sort of new terrain for me. When I make my corsets, and the corset for the Vivienne Westwood dress as well, I made it completely out of nylon marquisette, so this very thin but firm, not stretchy material that is used in bras as well. But we'll see. I think this is why these 50s corsets were also marketed as very comfortable, because of the stretchiness. So the center part will be obviously here at the gore, and it ends here at point 0 at the center of the cup. So I elongate this line and I'm going to go down in a right angle to the baseline down from point 0. This will be the center piece. The second piece ends roughly here at the underwire, so that's gonna be fun to sew. I'm going to place it slightly below the mark for the cup, and I'll also go down in a right angle to the baseline. This crossing point will be my point 9, and this will be the second piece of the corset. When I measure these 3 parts, they are almost divided equally into thirds, so I'm going to divide this line by 3 roughly. I think just to make it a bit more balanced, I'm going to go 5 centimeters from the closure and 5 centimeters from point 9, which is roughly 1/3 of this line here. So I'm going to find 5 centimeters from point 9 on the line 3, 8. This will be my point 10. And I'll also go down 5 centimeters to the side from point 8. This will be my point 11. I will now draw perpendicular lines 2, 3, 8 through 10 and 11. This will be the third piece, the fourth and the fifth eventually. Oh, and I also obviously draw a perpendicular line through 8 as well. So this will be my 5 pieces, and now to find the waist, what I usually do is I put on a bra, ideally one made with the same underwire that we are going to use for the corset as well, but not necessarily. And I measure from point 0, so from the lowest point of the cup, down to my waist. And I do that by tying a band around my waist that has the same width as the original, which is 2 centimeters, and the same width that I'm going to use on my corset eventually. So from point 0 down to the top of the band, for me it's 12 centimeters. You can also go ahead and measure your waist at this point. I'm going to find my measurement, these 12 centimeters, on my pattern down from point 1, 0, 9, 10, 11 and 8. This will be my point 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and 17. And I'm going to connect those. Now, because this line is angled, this piece here, the third one, already slims down quite a bit too much in fact. So to make this third piece a bit more balanced, I'm going to extend it by 5 millimeters to the side, and so essentially just on this line for 5 millimeters. This will be my point 18. And I connect it to point 10. This will be the new edge for the third piece. We can now measure the width of the waist on this pattern. I measure 12 to 13, 13 to 14, and now attention, 14 to 18, 15 to 16, and 16 to 17. And I add all of these measurements together. With the corset you can obviously cinch your waist. You don't have to. Obviously I'm talking here about personal preferences and options. I'll talk a bit more about it in my next video, but with this type of corset you can cinch your waist tremendously. They are not constructed like tight lacing corsets. They are the sort of comfortable version that is meant to accentuate your waist. So you can take out, say, I don't know, 10 centimeters. I guess you could take out maximum 4. And what I usually do is I measure my waist very tightly, but so that it's still comfortable for me. And I take this measurement, I subtract the closure once again and divide it by 2. This will be the measurement of my cinched waist. And then you have to subtract this measurement from the width that we measured just now here at the waist on our pattern. And this might be a completely different number for you. For me it's 4 centimeters, which means that I need to evenly take out 4 centimeters at the waist on all of these pieces. I rounded up my number, but because it's so nice and even, I'm going to take out 5 millimeters on each side, here at the center, on each side of point 13, for the second piece, next to point 14. For the third piece, I'm not going to take out anything at all, just because this piece is already very angled. For this piece here, I'm going to take out 5 millimeters, which is basically point 18 anyway. I'm also going to take out 5 millimeters on each side of point 16. And here at the closure as well, at point 17, I'm going to take out 5 millimeters. As you can see on the original, also each piece is slightly cinched at the waist, so it goes straight down, cinched at the waist. And now I'm going to connect these points for my cinched waist up to the points at the baseline, so to point 1, 0, 9, 10, 11 and 8. And these lines, they need to go straight down for a while before they curve into the points of the waist, because if you look at our rib cage, it also goes straight for a bit before it cinches into the waist. Now I want to find the top of my corset, and I don't want the back to be too low. I want it still to be able to pull a bit on the underwire. So I'm going to extend this line by 1 centimeter. This will be my point 19. And I'm going to connect 5 and 19 and divide it by 3. And I'm going to measure 1/3 of this line upwards from point 19. And I'll go down here for about 1 centimeter. It is a design preference. This is to help me find a pretty smooth line for the top. As with the bra, it needs to go in a right angle for a bit at point 5 and at point 19. By the way, the noise you might hear is people outside sitting at a bar enjoying the evening. I left the window open because the air is so nice. I hope it doesn't annoy you too much. So this is the top of the corset finished. You can also choose to keep it as is. This would actually be a great supportive strapless long line bra, but on this sort of Mary Widow type corsets the length really varies. There are longer ones that end in a straight line, and the one I'm referencing, my original, goes down here at the stomach, then up here at the hip bones, which is very comfortable if you like sitting, and goes slightly down here again at the back to sort of smooth it. All of these pieces connect in a smooth curvy line, so I'm going to try and recreate that. I have several vintage recreation corsets and some old corsets from my friends, so I took out the boning out of those. This is spiral boning. You can also buy it and adjust it to the length you need. You can also use plastic ones and cut them accordingly. But I'm going to sort of Frankenstein the ones that I have because I found some that are almost the same length as the ones on my original. So my stick at the center is 32.5 centimeters long, and because it won't sit directly at the edges, there will be an elastic at the bottom, and here at the top there will be seams for the underwire. So I'm going to add 2 centimeters wiggle room to the length of the stick. So my stick at the center is 30.5 centimeters long, so I'll measure 30.5 centimeters plus 2 centimeters wiggle room down here at the center line. This will be my point 20. My next stick is 22.5 centimeters, so once again plus wiggle room, I'm going to go down 24.5 centimeters from point 0. This will be point 21. The next one is 20 centimeters long, so I'm going to go 23 centimeters down here from the top of the underwire. This will be point 22. My stick between the third and the fourth part is 21 centimeters, so I'm gonna go down 23 centimeters, extending this original line at point 15, measured from the top of the corset. This will be point 23 for me. And my last stick is 22 centimeters long. Once again, I measure from the top of the corset down here at the center line. The closure, I'm going to make it as long as on the original, which is 24 centimeters. Once again, I measure from the top of the corset, so from point 19. This will be my point 24, this will be my point 25. Now that we slimmed all our pieces at the waist, we need to widen them again for the hip. And I don't have an exact formula for that, especially because we are dealing with an uneven length and stretchy materials. It also depends on your hip to waist ratio. But I'm going to look at the original for reference, and then once we make our mock-up, we can see whether some width needs to be added or taken out. I'm pretty sure that the center line on the original just goes straight down from the waist, which makes sense since its function is to keep the stomach somewhat flat. So I'm simply going down straight from the waist to the height of point 20. These lines here, to me it seems that they simply return to the original line. So I'm going to connect the waist points of piece 1 and 2 in a smooth line to point 21. Here it definitely extends for a bit on this side and on this side as well. On this side maybe a bit more even. So I'm going to, for the second piece, I'm going to extend it by 5 millimeters to the side. And here for the third part, I'm actually going to extend it by 1.5 centimeters because this line looks pretty extreme to me, which also makes sense because that's the line where the hip bone is roughly located. To the right, I think it extends a bit less maybe, but because we already relocated the line for the third piece here, I'm going to extend it by 1.5 centimeters from point 23 in a right angle to this line. I think the fourth piece simply returns to its original line on this side, and I think on this side it might be extended by 1 centimeter from the original line. So here I'm going to return to point 23 for the fourth piece. And on this side of point 24 I'm going to extend the fourth piece by 1 centimeter. And the last piece, the piece of the closure, I think it might also return to its original line. So I'm going to connect my waist points to point 24 and to point 25. So this will be our pattern pieces, and to make a pretty smooth and curvy line for the bottom, I'm going to mark 1 centimeter in a right angle to this line at center front and the line here at center back. Then I transfer each piece onto transparent paper to be able to lay them against each other. At this point I also double check that all my waist points and end points meet at the same length. And now I can sort of find an organic, smooth line for the bottom of my corset by arranging these pieces together. This is my finished pattern for now. I'm going to add 1 centimeter seam allowance at the top and bottom for the elastics. Also 1 centimeter seam allowance for the cup and for the closure, and 1 centimeter on each side for my boning. So this is my mock-up, and I made it in the same way I usually make my mock-ups for corsets, but also the same way I made the corset for my Vivienne Westwood dress. And a quick note, my grain line always goes in a right angle to the markings of the waist, because this is the part that needs to be as firm as possible, that needs to not be stretchy at all. I've cut out my pieces, sewn them together, pressed the seam allowances to the side and top stitched them, because I'm going to put my boning directly in there. For center front, however, I added gross grain tape and top stitched it in the most sloppy way possible. Then I added my waistband by simply stitching it on each side of the tunnel at the height of my waist markings. I added a fold over elastic to the top with a zigzag stitch. Then I've sewn in my foamed cups. Those were simply connected with a zigzag stitch once again. And then I top stitched the seam allowance of the cups down to create a tunnel for my underwires. So I'm not using any extra tunnels, no covering for the cups. Then I put in my boning, sewn on the elastic for the bottom, again with a zigzag stitch, and then the closure. And this is my mock-up, you know, nothing fancy, very simple and fast, just to see whether all of these lines work at all. And it's okay. You know, it's the process. My most obvious mistake is that I didn't make enough wiggle room for my boning, so the sticks ended up sitting way too tight inside their tunnels, which also might distort the lines of the corset a little bit. However, I'm pleased with the lines themselves, with the position of the pieces, but the stretchy pieces don't work at all, and for now I'm not quite sure whether it's because of my sloppy sewing or because of the pattern, but these pieces create absolutely horrendous lines, especially these ones, which are supposed to hold the cup in its position, but you know, also the back This is extremely annoying to me. My best guess is that the power net I'm using is not firm enough. And if I compare it to the one on the original, it is so much more tight. In fact, I wasn't able to find one that has the same sort of strength to it. Usually in my corsets, as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't work with stretchy fabrics at all, and I usually don't have these lines forming. On typical Merry Widows, these pieces are stretchy. On my original, although it's not a Warner's Merry Widow, it is stretchy. But there are pictures of other 50s corsets where it's not the case, like this one for example. And if I think of a bra construction, this part here that holds the cup up until point 3 basically, it needs to be quite firm to be able to hold and stretch the underwire. So I'm going to make a few more mock-ups to try and find my mistake. Now I have tested out a few different things. I tried to make those pieces tighter and wider to position my underwire in a slightly different way. And long story short, I ditched the stretchy fabric altogether. I made this one in the exact same way, used the exact same pattern, but now it fits and looks so much better. The cups actually sit in the position they should. There are no more weird lines forming. And like I said, I am now pretty sure that my power net just wasn't firm enough. And it's really hard to find the right one on the internet because this one was actually advertised as very strong. If you have any ideas on whether this was a construction mistake, let me know in the comments. It would have been nice to be able to figure it out to make a somewhat authentic recreation of a Merry Widow, but it's not like I haven't tried. And you know, I had the privilege of working with some couturiers in the past, and corsets inside those dresses are usually not stretchy at all. They are usually made completely out of bobinette or some sort of nylon marquisette. Regarding comfort, I don't notice any difference really. The only thing is that now, because this part isn't stretchy anymore, I need to make it a bit wider here at hip level on the 3rd and 4th piece. And because the bottom line itself is a bit too curvy, I wasn't able to sew it with the elastic so that this line looks smooth. So it turned out pretty pointy and angular. I'm going to correct that and polish these lines a bit more. But other than that, that's the pattern I'm going to use. I decided that I won't use any stretchy fabrics for my corset. In the next video, I'll be sewing the thing for real with some silks and such, and we'll chat a bit about its history and corsets in general. But now it's getting pretty late or early. I hope these instructions and trials and errors help you out. This is how I construct my corset. Have a lovely weekend. Bye!